Howdy, friends. Welcome back to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Andy Vance. Thanks for joining us today. You're probably aware of what's been happening relative to inflation. The cost of everything in food production has gone up and continues to rise, it seems. Fertilizer prices in particular have dominated a goodly portion of top of mind for a lot of producers, as that's one of the highest priced and fastest rising price components of production in the row crop space. Input cost stress that's put on row crop farmers is significant. And so we're going to talk about that a bit today as it influences the overall cost of feed and thus has a big ripple effect in the livestock sector as well, not just the crop side. Joining us to talk about that, as well as a U.S.-based solution to growing fertilizer concerns, is Patrick Serfass, the Executive Director of the American Biogas Council. Patrick, welcome back to the show. Good to see you again. Let's start off with maybe a top line view, 30,000 foot on what's happening in the fertilizer markets today. What are we looking at in terms of supply, demand, prices, and what do you see ahead?
Yeah, well, thanks, Andy. I'm glad to be here. And I would say top line, the issue is that prices are going up. And while the fertilizer prices have not fully impacted our agriculture industry yet, because a lot of farmers bought their fertilizer, made their purchases for 2022 and 2021, that means that the ripple effect of high fertilizer prices it's going to continue, and it's probably going to get worse because the things that are creating the increase in prices aren't getting any better. Just real high level, when you look at the fertilizer industry across the U.S., some of it is made domestically. We are, as a country, one of the biggest producers of nitrogen and phosphorus-based fertilizer components, but we do still import a lot of it. We import a lot of potassium as well. And one of the reasons that we don't make everything that we need is that when you talk about making fertilizer, you're making a lot of nitrogen-based fertilizers with the use of fossil fuels like natural gas. And then for a lot of your phosphorus, potassium, you're mining for those materials. And especially in the case of phosphorus, you're mining in a way that creates a lot of waste. So we're mining a lot of phosphorus from like Florida and Idaho. It creates a real acid waste. It can create radioactive waste as well. And just politically, as Americans, we don't have the appetite today for mining as much as we did in the past. And so there's a resistance to doing all that mining here, which means that we need to rely more on imports. And so let's look at where we get some of our NP and K from. Well, we get, the world gets half of their nitrogen-based fertilizers from Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. And as we know, that is a conflict-ridden area right now. And that is one of the large reasons why fertilizer prices are going up globally and why we're feeling that in the US. Not only does a lot of the material that makes up the nitrogen-based fertilizers exist in that region, but a lot of the cheap natural gas has been from Russia as well. And that's creating stresses, and that's putting fertilizer prices up. I would say I'm seeing generally fertilizer prices up by at least 4x across the country. So 4 times higher. That's a huge jump. And luckily, a lot of commodity prices are up too. So that's also lessening a little bit of the blow, but we can't count on that happening long term. And we need to find a way to have some better domestic solutions for our NP and K. There's some things that we can do with the manure that we're already using across our farmland in the US. And we can also better utilize some of the nutrients that are not in the manure to help address some of these import strained fertilizer price spikes.
We're going to talk about some of those solutions you're talking about in a moment, but you mentioned, the dynamics that have led to higher prices, not necessarily going to change anytime soon, certainly here in the short run. I want to think about the ripple effect that some of these higher prices have, and understanding that the fertilizer market's not necessarily your key expertise. So I appreciate you kind of having the thought exercise with me here of the ripple effect, if you will, higher fertilizer prices have throughout the agriculture sector at the farm level and beyond. Would you help maybe quantify or talk through some of that ripple effect? Yes, I can see it pretty clearly if I'm raising corn and concerned about the price of nitrogen, but that's not the only person dealing with this headache up and down that supply chain.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you're a row crop farmer, then you're seeing that impact directly of the higher fertilizer prices. But if you're a livestock farmer, you're also seeing it because a lot of the feed that your animals are eating are also coming from these crops, especially if if your animals are eating the corn leftovers. Corn prices are going to go up because fertilizer prices are going up. Then livestock operation costs are going up, and that's going to increase the cost of food across the board. And obviously, that's a really difficult thing. So that's part of where we're seeing it. The other places that fertilizer is not just used on the farm, manure is not just used on the farm. There's a lot of transport of the fertilizer as well to other places. So the ripple effect kind of goes from the row crop to the livestock, and then anyone else off farm that ends up using fertilizer products or the byproducts of the animals.
You alluded to some of the solutions to this. One possible solution that you and your colleagues are working on, which is a byproduct related to the anaerobic digestion of organic waste material. Tell us more about that product and how it can help play a role in solving this challenge.
Sure. Well, the organization that I run, the American Biogas Council, is focused on building more biogas systems. And biogas system as a system takes in organic material and recycles it using the microbes that are already present in that material. So think about taking in manure or food waste or wastewater sludge, and you create a nice warm environment where the microbes are already in that material. It's not too hot, not too cold, stirred not too much, not too little, the real Goldilocks scenario there. And those microbes go to work, they reproduce, they eat the organic material, and they burp out methane and creating biogas. And that renewable energy made from our manure and other organic materials is incredibly valuable and a great way to recycle that material on farms. But as it relates to fertilizer, all of that organic material that came in had a bunch of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that material. And that NPK does not get converted into biogas. That NPK comes through in the digested material. But that digestion process has broken all of the sometimes complex chemical bounds or bonds that are in manure and other materials. It's broken down the manure into basic acids and carbohydrates. And as you do that, you produce biogas. But now your digested material, or your digested manure, in the case of many farmers, all that NPK is now in a form that is highly plant available. And you've killed 99+% of the pathogens in the process. So let's just pretend we're talking about a manure feedstock. You take a raw manure that can have an odor to it and has pathogens in it. And now you take that manure and you knock the odor out of it, you knock the pathogens out of it, and you still have all the NP and K, but it's in a form that are ready for the plants to absorb it right away. And because it's in that form that the NPK can be absorbed immediately by crops and it's safer, means that you could spread it. We need to work on the regulations, but you could spread it when crops are growing and have it be safe. And that way the nutrients the uptake is happening immediately by the plants. And that helps with our soil health, and it helps to keep those nutrients out of our waterways and even reduce water pollution as well. Not the least of which is the fact that you're actually utilizing all those nutrients. So it ends up being a more efficient process of utilizing those nutrients for the farmer.
Are we talking liquids in terms of what's applied on the field? Are we talking liquids? Are we talking solids? Are we talking both? What does that look like in terms of the application?
Yeah, the farmer gets to choose. So if you are a dairy, what you're probably going to do, because you need bedding for your animals, and there is a fiber element of the manure that does not get fully digested by a biogas system, you can pull those solids out, the fiber out. And when you do that, it feels a lot like sawdust, popular bedding material. And so I was just on a dairy last week in Wisconsin, 2,300 head dairy, and farmer Joe, and he could not stop talking about how much he loved the solids, his digestate that he was using to bed his animals, because they loved it and they're super comfy on it. It saves him a ton of money to not have to buy bedding. And so in his particular case, he separates the liquids and solids, and then he uses the liquids as a liquid fertilizer, just like he would a synthetic or a chemical fertilizer, except for it's made right from his biogas system. But on other farms, especially if you don't need those solids for fiber, or maybe you're taking in other materials that are not manure, like food waste or wastewater sludge, and your digested material has a different constituency to it, then you might just use the solids and liquids together. So it depends on where you are. And then another element, especially as we talk about the fertilizer markets, is you don't have to use all of the NP and K that's already available in the manure just the way that it is in the ratio that it is. You can add technology to the biogas system that after you digest the material, you can separate out your N and your P, or you can separate out just the K or just the P. Because maybe you're in an area that already has a lot of phosphorus in your soil. You don't need that extra phosphorus, but someone several miles down the road or in a different watershed, they'd be happy to buy that phosphorus material from you. So you can put a technology on the end that'll take that phosphorus out. That way you're not adding nutrients that you don't need to your soil and that might be bad for the watershed, and you create an additional revenue stream. So that separation of the nutrients is also something that you can do easily added onto a biogas system. Lots of opportunities, lots of different ways to do it.
What kind of results would I expect, or what kind of results are you seeing when digestate's been put on fields?
Well, as you might imagine, there's a wide variety of results because you have different feedstocks going into your biogas system, which means there's different kinds of digested material coming out. It's to the naked eye, it's or I guess to the non-farmer, it all looks very similar, but farmers will notice the difference in your nutrient value and how many solids are in the material. So it's a little bit different here and there. But we've seen studies that show that biogas digestate, the digested material, can boost crop yields by up to 10 to 30%. I was just looking at a study last night because someone was asking me for a source on that. Found a study, it was up 27% for tomato plants compared to using a synthetic fertilizer. So you can't expect 10 to 30% at every single farm, but man, I feel like if I could get 5%, I'd be more than happy with that. 10 to 30% could be a game changer. So certainly worth checking out. And I think that digestive materials just got to be one of the most undervalued materials that we have out there. And it's just, people don't know enough about it. And as the more we use it, the more people will be talking about it. And I think the more it'll get utilized, which will be good for all of us.
Well, it kind of strikes me that what you're describing is really a closed loop process. So you're looking at not only the economic benefits that you just described, but also I'm thinking there's some some environmental benefits as well that help create bit of a sustainability story for farmers to tell about their operation. Is that a fair take?
It is. The closed loop story is great, and I'll just use the dairy example again. The cows eat silage. They make methane, or they make manure. You put the manure in your digester. Use that to make biogas. The biogas can be used for electricity on the farm and heat on the farm, especially in a northern climate. It can help keep the barn warm. And then the digested material can go on the fields to grow more corn or feed that then goes back to the animals to eat. Meanwhile, the milk needs to be delivered every day, and you need to fuel the trucks that deliver the milk. So let's take some of the biogas and turn it into renewable natural gas. Its main constituent of biogas is methane, which is the same as conventional natural gas. So let's, instead of running those tanker trucks delivering the milk every day on diesel, let's get those running on renewable natural gas made at the dairy farm. Well, they're going to take the milk to the milk processor, and let's say that milk processor is making cheese or ice cream. That milk processing facility is also making a waste. It's usually a wastewater, like the whey that ends up coming out of the material. And that wastewater needs to go someplace too. Well, that wastewater is a perfect feedstock to go back to the digester. So let's take the waste from the milk processor, put it back into the biogas system to make more biogas, recycle that material, recycle the nutrients, and you all keep going around the circle again and again and again. So every system isn't as perfect like that, but on a larger scale or a smaller scale, you're going to see some versions of those circles. And it's all about just making better use of the material that we already have. And who doesn't want to do that?
And friends, if you have questions for Patrick about any of this, I would encourage you to put those there in the comments below, or in the Q&A section if you're watching in Feedstuffs 365 below, or just say the comments section of your particular social channel, wherever you're watching. Patrick, I want to think about the types of operations where this makes the most sense. You've just described, I think, a really good example at a dairy, but does this only make sense for operations that have livestock right there, or livestock operations that are maybe producing their own feedstuffs, like you talked about with the dairy and the silage example? Or is the use of digestate something that makes sense only for crop farmers, or if I'm a crop farmer that doesn't have livestock there? What kind of operations are we seeing where this is a solution that really can work and pay?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you need NP and K, if you need fertilizer, then you should be considering, in addition to wherever you might be buying your chemical fertilizers from, your synthetic fertilizers, you should be talking to someone with a biogas system and asking them if you can get some of their digestive material. I'll tell you right now is an excellent time to do that, because across the industry, we've got 2,300 biogas systems operating in the US today. So there's biogas systems in all 50 states. We see the potential to build 15,000 more. So we've really only tapped about 15% of the industry right now. But there's biogas systems everywhere. And I will tell you that right now it shouldn't be this way, which is part of the reason why we're talking to you. But it shouldn't be this way. But most biogas systems are giving away their digested material. And so if you can take some of that off their hands, or maybe even just pay for transport, you could probably get today digested material at a really attractive price. And eventually that will change as more demand grows. But for right now, it's a really good time to switch to that, because lots of times the farms that have the biogas system, their business is going well and they're growing, but they don't necessarily have the space to put more nutrients on their soil. So they need other destinations for the digestive material. So there's a way to share that digestate to like row crop farmers and others that need it. That could really work out well in a mutually beneficial way. So we're seeing biogas systems on livestock farms primarily because that's where the manure is. They want to deal with the manure. They can use the solids, as I mentioned, for the bedding. So there's a couple extra benefits for handling the manure. But we're also finding that biogas systems are built as just standalone food waste recycling systems, where there might just be a lot of food waste produced. It's basically, you're going to find biogas systems wherever the organic waste is. So wastewater plant, large food waste processors, and farms are the most likely places you're going to find that organic waste. Organic waste is heavy is expensive to move. So you build the biogas systems where the waste is. And then at that point, it's a matter of distributing the digestive material. And it could be in liquid form by tanker truck. Sometimes you pull out like an N or a P product from the digestate, and you even dry it so it's pelletized, so it ends up being dry, like the kind that you can even use on golf courses, that sort of thing. So it can come in many forms, and it's just a matter of what the customer needs, and then the biogas system owner will create that product.
Something you said earlier, you made reference earlier in the conversation about need for some regulation or some rulemaking on something or another. But it got me wondering: are there any regulatory issues or policies related to the use specifically of digestate that farmers should be aware of as they're thinking about it as an option for part of their fertilizer supply?
There aren't any extra regulations right now. Digested manure is just treated the same as raw manure. So you have to comply. That right so far, the EPA and USDA don't distinguish the difference between digested manure and raw manure. So it just gets treated the same. We do have a digestate certification program. So if you are a biogas producer making digestate, making digested material, you can register with our digestate certification program. And that way the person buying the material has an audited third-party validation that the material is safe, that you can trust what the NPK and micronutrient values are in the material. And that's just an added audit, basically, to help with customer assurance. That can be done on a voluntary basis.
Well, and makes a lot of sense in the context of a lot of us are paying more and more attention to making sure we're putting the right amount of nutrient on the soil in the right place at the right time, and trying to manage that the nutrients stay on the land. So it makes a lot of sense to have that additional audit certification, as you called it. Final thoughts or comments that you want producers to leave with today, either those who are thinking about using the product as part of their nutrient system, or for that matter, livestock producers listening who have some skin in the game as well?
I would just say, find your friends that have a biogas system and ask them if their digestate is available and what it's like and whether it would make sense for you. Start there. And if you need more help, we are at AmericanBiogasCouncil.org, and we would love to help you too.
Great conversation. Thanks for joining us today, Patrick. Patrick Serfass, Executive Director of the American Biogas Council. And I want to appreciate you as well for joining us here for the conversation. A reminder, you can find out about any of our upcoming Feedstuffs 365 sessions, as well as our webinar series at feedstuffs365.com. We've got a great set of webinars coming up later this month you'll want to be a part of. Watch feedstuffs365.com for all the details. You can also find all of our archived sessions as well. So if you've missed a recent session of Feedstuffs 365, you say, gosh, man, I really wish I had been able to catch that one. You can find it on demand anytime at feedstuffs365.com. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Andy Vance.